I'm 33 years old. I've got a good job, a degree, my own apartment, a decent car. I work out regularly. I'm tall, bearded, built. From the outside, I probably look like a guy who has his life together. And honestly, in most ways, I do. Except for one thing. I still haven't been able to love anyone. When I was 22, I had a girlfriend. Not just a girlfriend. I was convinced she would become my wife. We talked about kids. We talked about building a house someday. We'd joke about baby names and argue over things that felt important because we genuinely believed we'd spend our lives together. I loved her with everything I had. No backup plan. No emotional safety net. Just complete trust. Then one day she asked me to meet her. I still remember every detail. The way she avoided eye contact. The way my stomach tightened before she even started talking. The way my entire world collapsed when she told me she'd been seeing another man for more than a year. An older man. And she was leaving me for him. Not next month. Not after thinking it over. Right then. People say breakups happen to everyone. Sure. But this didn't feel like a breakup. It felt like discovering that the person you trusted most had been living a completely different life behind your back. I was wrecked. The first few months are mostly a blur. Work, home, sleep, repeat. I was basically running on autopilot. Years passed. I rebuilt my life, got promoted, bought an apartment, bought a car, started taking care of myself. On the outside, I became a completely different man. Women came into my life too. Plenty of them. Beautiful women, smart women, kind women. Some wanted something serious. Some genuinely cared about me. But every single time, the same thing happened. At first, there was interest. Then attraction. Then I'd realize something was missing. No spark. No lightning strike. No moment where I thought, damn, I'm in trouble. And eventually things would fade away. Over the years, I've seen therapists. 2 different ones. I've worked through the betrayal, the heartbreak, the fear of getting close to someone again. And honestly, therapy helped. I don't hate women. I don't think they're all cheaters. I don't think the world owes me anything. I actually like women. I enjoy dating. I enjoy meeting people. I just don't fall in love. And that's the part that scares me. Sometimes I wonder if I used up my entire capacity for love back when I was 22. Like I pushed all my chips into the middle of the table and lost everything in a single hand. And now I'm chasing a feeling I can never get back. I know that's not fair to the women I meet. Nobody should have to compete with a ghost. But I can't help it. Because deep inside me, that younger version of myself is still there. Not the guy with the beard. Not the guy with the apartment and the career. The 22-year-old kid who genuinely believed he'd found his forever person. Sometimes I think part of him never left that conversation. He's still sitting there. Still waiting for an explanation. Still trying to understand why it happened. Maybe that sounds ridiculous. It's been 11 years. But pain doesn't care about calendars. It gets quieter. It hides deeper. But it doesn't always disappear. So I keep moving forward. I work. I build my career. I date. I laugh. I make plans. And somewhere inside, I'm still waiting for one simple thing. That moment when my heart finally skips a beat again. Because right now, there are 2 people living inside me. A 33-year-old man, and a 22-year-old kid whose heart never fully healed.
I always wanted only one child, not because I dislike kids. It was simply the life I wanted for myself. I knew my limits, my goals, and the future I envisioned. My husband knew that from the beginning. We talked about it before we got married. We talked about it again after our first daughter was born. Every time, he agreed. Or at least I thought he did. After having our first child, I was extremely careful with contraception. That's why finding out I was pregnant again felt impossible. I was shocked, terrified. I cried. I told my husband I wasn't ready to go through pregnancy a second time. He begged me to keep the baby. He promised we'd manage, promised he'd help, promised I'd never regret it. Eventually, I decided to continue the pregnancy. The decision was mine, but it was made under enormous pressure. And then everything went wrong. Severe morning sickness, exhaustion, swelling, blood pressure issues. Every day felt like survival. The delivery was even worse. Afterward, my hair started falling out in clumps. My teeth began deteriorating. My body felt completely broken. Not long after, I was diagnosed with diabetes. Whether it was connected to the pregnancy or not, nobody could say for sure. But I remember looking in the mirror and barely recognizing myself. Our younger daughter was a difficult baby. She cried constantly, barely slept, needed attention around the clock. To be fair, my husband did help. A lot. He took night shifts. He cared for the kids. He did everything he could to lighten my load. Our parents supported us too. This isn't a story about being abandoned. We were, by all appearances, a happy family. That's what makes what happened next so devastating. 14 years passed. My older daughter is now 16. My younger daughter just turned 14. After her birthday celebration, both girls stayed overnight at their grandmother's house. My husband and I went home. He'd had a few drinks. He was relaxed, happy. Then he smiled and said, "See, you didn't even want her." At first, I didn't understand what he meant. Then he explained, smiling, almost proudly, like he was telling a funny story. That's when I learned the truth. The pregnancy wasn't an accident. He had intentionally caused it because he wanted another child, because he believed he'd eventually prove me wrong, because he thought he knew what was best for me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. For 14 years, I'd thought fate had intervened. For 14 years, he knew exactly what had happened, and he never told me. The most horrifying part wasn't the pregnancy. It wasn't the sickness. It wasn't the childbirth. It wasn't the health consequences. It was realizing that my choice had never truly been mine. He took that choice away, made a decision about my body without my consent, and then spent 14 years feeling proud of it. The fight that followed was enormous. I told him I wanted a divorce. For the first time in our marriage, I looked at him and felt like I was staring at a stranger. Because you don't spend decades trusting someone and then casually discover they're capable of something like this. What hurts even more is that he genuinely doesn't understand why I'm devastated. He keeps saying we built a wonderful family. Our daughters are happy. Everything worked out. What's the problem? Then came the threat. He said that if I file for divorce, he'll tell our daughters everything. And they'll blame me. Because to two teenage girls, the story might sound very simple. Mom didn't want her younger daughter. That's the part that terrifies me. Not losing my marriage. Losing my daughter's trust. Losing the bond we've built over their entire lives. The truth is, I love both of my daughters equally. I have never regretted my younger daughter for a single second. Not once. But loving my child and forgiving betrayal are two completely different things. People confuse those things all the time. I don't regret my daughter. I regret the lie. I can't forgive the deception. I can't forgive someone deciding he had the right to make life-changing choices for me. Now I'm standing at a crossroads I never wanted to face. Stay with a man I no longer trust. Or leave and risk becoming the villain in my own family's story. And honestly, I still don't know which choice hurts less. A few years ago, I met a guy in a hospital. He had been in a serious accident. The doctors believed there was a chance he'd physically recover, but they also kept saying something else. The biggest obstacle wasn't his body anymore. It was the trauma. He had lost faith in himself. He didn't talk about the future, didn't make plans. Some days it felt like he'd already decided his life was over. We met by accident. At first, we just exchanged greetings in the hallway. Then we started talking. Then we'd grab coffee together. Before long, we were seeing each other almost every day. I'd stop by after work, sit with him when he was having a rough day, listen to him talk about everything he'd lost. Sometimes he was angry. Sometimes he shut everyone out. Sometimes he said hurtful things and apologized later. But I stayed. Looking back, I was probably already in love with him. I just didn't want to admit it. He wasn't perfect. Far from it. He was stubborn, difficult, and sometimes incredibly frustrating. But for some reason, he was the person I wanted to help. As time passed, the doctors became more optimistic. Physically, he was improving. The real battle was psychological. He was terrified. Terrified of failing. Terrified of falling. Terrified of believing in himself again. So rehabilitation became our routine. Exercises. Therapy. Small victories. Setbacks. Days when he wanted to quit. Days when I practically dragged him back to try one more time. I still remember the first time he walked several meters completely on his own. He looked happier than I'd ever seen him. And I cried. Honestly, I think I was even happier than he was. He knew I loved him. We never really had a big conversation about it, but it wasn't a secret. He knew. Sometimes he'd tell me I deserved better, that he'd ruin my life, that being with him would only make things harder for me. Back then, I thought he was being selfless. Now I'm not so sure. Years passed. He recovered. Started walking normally again. Went back to work. Started seeing friends. Started rebuilding his life. And through all of it, I stayed by his side. Part of me believed that eventually he'd stop being afraid. That someday he'd let himself love me too. Then one day he disappeared. No argument. No breakup conversation. No explanation. He simply stopped answering. No calls. No texts. Nothing. If we happen to run into each other somewhere, he acts like we're strangers. Like we never met. Like there was no hospital. No recovery. No late-night conversations. No endless hours spent helping him believe in himself again. The weirdest thing is that what hurts most isn't losing a relationship. Because maybe we never truly had one. What hurts is something else. How can someone erase an entire chapter of their life? How can they look at the person who stood beside them during their darkest moments and pretend they never existed? I've spent years trying to understand it. Maybe he's ashamed of that period. Maybe someone else came into his life. Maybe he wanted to leave the past behind completely. I honestly don't know, and I probably never will. But one thought still breaks my heart. When he couldn't walk, he needed me every day. Once he could move forward on his own, it turned out he didn't want me walking beside him anymore.
I turned down a man who loved me. The strange part is that I loved him too. Not the kind of love you feel after a few exciting dates. I knew him deeply. I knew the way he laughed when he was nervous. The way he'd leave a coffee mug on the table and swear he'd put it away later. The way he looked at me like he'd already decided I was the person he wanted to spend his life with. And honestly, I saw it too. I saw the house, the child, the lazy Sunday mornings, the quiet little routines that somehow become the most important parts of life when you're with the right person. We could have had all of it. Maybe that's why people still think my decision was insane. Because I walked away, not because he cheated, not because of distance, Not because I was afraid of commitment. I left even though I loved him. Years passed. He married a woman who looked surprisingly like me. The first time I saw her picture, it made my stomach drop. It felt like life had taken pieces of me, rearranged them into another person, and handed her the future that could have been mine. Later, they divorced. And part of me still thinks I had something to do with it. Not because I interfered. Not because I tried to get him back. But because I wonder if he spent years looking for me in other women. The reason I left was actually simple. I was happy with him. Too happy. Around him, my anxiety disappeared. My pain disappeared. The constant struggle inside me, the thing that pushed me to grow, learn, and become stronger, started fading away. He accepted me completely. And somehow, that terrified me. I know how ridiculous that sounds. But sometimes I feel like the best parts of who I am were forged through loneliness, heartbreak, and disappointment. Like life spent years hammering away at me until something stronger emerged. And with him, that process would have stopped. I've always described it as a kind of emotional lobotomy. One clean hit, and you're a happy fool forever. Comfortable, safe, content. No more wrestling with difficult questions. No more pushing yourself. No more searching for who you really are. You just live. A lot of people would take that deal. Most people probably would. I couldn't. That's why I always laugh when people say, "The heart wants what it wants." People use that line as an excuse for every reckless decision imaginable. Sometimes the heart has to be told no. Sometimes you have to look at the person you love and walk away. Not because the love isn't strong enough. Because it's too strong. Do I regret it? Of course I do. Sometimes late at night, I imagine the life we never had, the kids, the house, growing old together. And every single time, something inside me aches. But I still believe I made the right choice. There's only one thought I can never escape. I chose my own future. But I may have chosen his too. And if that's true, the hardest part isn't that I made myself unhappy. The hardest part is knowing I may have hurt the one person who loved me more than anyone else ever did.
It didn't start with the hair, and it didn't start with the scratches. It started much earlier, with a feeling. That awful feeling when nothing obvious has happened, but suddenly you know something is wrong. My husband didn't change overnight. It was gradual. Less conversation, less affection, less interest in me, less interest in us. At first, I made excuses for him. Work, stress, exhaustion, life. Anything seemed easier to believe than the possibility I was trying not to think about. Then one day, he accidentally said another woman's name. Just for a second. He corrected himself immediately. Acted like it was nothing. But some things stick in your memory forever. That was the moment suspicion moved in. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't start interrogating him. I just started paying attention. The more closely I watched, the more I noticed. New habits. Strange delays. Unexplained trips. A phone that suddenly always faced downward. Little smiles after reading messages he'd quickly delete. Each thing by itself meant nothing. Together they painted a very different picture. Then came the scratches. Long scratches across his back. Fresh ones. He came up with some ridiculous explanation involving work and an accident. I didn't argue. I just nodded. I think that's when he decided I believed him. In reality, that's when I stopped believing him completely. I kept collecting pieces. Small things. Tiny inconsistencies. Moments that didn't add up. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted him. Told him everything I'd noticed. Every suspicion. Every question. Every inconsistency. He denied all of it. Calmly. Confidently. And technically, he had one advantage. I had no hard proof. Only intuition. Only dozens of little details that pointed in the same direction. After that conversation, I almost convinced myself I was wrong. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I'd created a story in my own head. Then I found the hair. Long strands of another woman's hair on his clothes. At first, I just stared at them. Then I remembered the woman I'd been suspecting for months. I found her photos online, zoomed in, compared the color, the texture, the length, and suddenly something inside me broke. I knew. It was her. Maybe that sounds crazy. Maybe it sounds obsessive. I don't care. Because that day I ended up on the floor crying harder than I ever have in my life. Not movie tears. Not dramatic tears. The kind of grief that physically hurts. The kind that makes it difficult to breathe. Because sometimes the truth doesn't hit all at once. Sometimes it destroys you one piece at a time. The strange part? I didn't leave. I didn't pack my bags. I didn't file for divorce. I didn't start another fight. And now he thinks he won. He thinks I believed the lies. He thinks I'm naive. He thinks I'm the fool in this story. Let him think that. Honestly, it makes things easier. Because silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes silence is strategy. Time to think. Time to prepare. Time to decide what comes next. Right now, he looks at me and believes he's in control. Believes the truth stayed buried. Believes his version of events survived. He's wrong. Because the most dangerous moment isn't when a woman is heartbroken. The most dangerous moment is when the heartbreak fades and all that's left is clarity. And I don't think he's realized I've already reached that point.
We were together for 5 years. 5 years isn't just a relationship. It's shared routines, shared friends, holidays with each other's families, inside jokes, future plans. It's reaching a point where you can't really imagine life without that person. That's why the breakup hit me so hard. Up until the very end, I honestly thought we were fine. Sure, we argued sometimes. Every couple does. Nothing serious. Nothing that looked like the beginning of the end. Then, a few days before we broke up, something changed. It was like he became a different person overnight. He started picking fights over everything. The way I answered a question. Where I left something in the apartment. The tone of my voice. Arguments appeared out of nowhere. I kept asking what was wrong. He kept saying everything was fine. Then one day he ended it. No huge fight. No dramatic scene. Just a calm conversation about how his feelings had changed and we should move on. It hurt, but I accepted it. I told myself these things happen. People fall out of love. Relationships end. Life goes on. Exactly 1 week later, I found out he got married. Not engaged. Not seeing someone new. Married. An actual wedding. A venue. A wedding dress. Professional photos. Dozens of guests. The whole thing. When I saw the pictures, I honestly thought I was misunderstanding something. I kept staring at them, trying to make the timeline make sense. Because here's the thing. You don't pull off a wedding like that in 7 days. You don't file paperwork, book a venue, organize guests, order a dress, hire vendors, and coordinate everything in a week. That's not how real life works. Which meant only one thing. The wedding had already been planned. While we were still together. While we were having dinner together. Watching movies together. Talking about our future. Going to bed next to each other. That realization hurt more than the breakup itself. Because suddenly I wasn't asking why did he leave. I was asking when did I actually lose him? A month earlier? 6 months earlier? Even longer? I replayed the final months of our relationship in my head. The late nights. The emotional distance. The weird explanations that never quite made sense. The moments I brushed off because I trusted him. And that's the cruel thing about trust. The more you trust someone, the fewer questions you ask. What hurt most wasn't that he chose someone else. People leave. Relationships fail. It happens. What broke me was realizing he let me keep believing. He let me make plans. Let me think we were still building a future together. All while he was already building one with somebody else. Years have passed since then. The pain isn't as sharp anymore. But sometimes I still think about those final days. Those ridiculous arguments over nothing. And now I see them differently. He wasn't trying to solve problems. He was looking for an excuse. A reason to make the breakup feel justified. A way to convince both of us that the relationship was already broken. The saddest part is that our relationship probably didn't end the day he broke up with me. It ended much earlier. I was just the last person to find out.